welcome all. Thank you for coming once again to the final fall Food for Thought here at the Whaling Museum of the Nantucket Historical Association. My name is Jacob Horton. I'm a programs coordinator, and it's been a great fall. Thank you for those of you who have come to each of these or a few of these. We love to see you, and we love to provide the service. So, I want to thank, as always, MS Worthington Foundation. They support this program each fall and each spring. We'll be back again this spring in February. And I'd like to thank Novation Media, as always, for providing our audiovisual support. So feel free to enjoy your lunch this afternoon, but please keep your cell phones silenced for the presentation. Restrooms and a water fountain right around the corner should you need them. So today's guest, Audrey Sterk. She's an interior designer, she's a painter, she's an artist. She uses wall space as her canvas. Through her Nantucket-based business, Audrey Sterk Design, she's developed an innovative means of duplicating her original wall murals and custom decorative painted finishes for homes and businesses over a variety of surfaces. She maintains the quality of her hand-painted style across her nature and history-inspired creations, and she relies mainly on water-based finishes for her work, has been highlighted across the country, including on HGTV's Green Home segment. She'll be welcoming questions throughout her talk this afternoon, so if you have something piques your interest, feel free to raise your hand and she'll respond. Please help me welcome painter, designer, and innovator Audrey Sterk.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my talk, and I'm so thankful to be here. Thank you to the NHA for having me as the final guest speaker. I wanted to, while I was thinking about pulling together my talk, I thought, gosh, what would be interesting for my audience? And so as we go through the pictures, if you have any questions that come to mind as we're talking, I really just like a very casual environment. I'm not, I'd like to, include everybody while we're going along. So don't be shy. Just ask any questions that you like. So I see a lot of friendly faces here and new people. So, afterwards, if you have any questions, you can come up and, ask me whatever you like. I brought with me some examples of resources that I like to pull from when I'm creating something special for my clients. And you'll see some examples of sketching. So this goes to like very, very beginning stages of my work to final photography. So, there's examples up here of some early American styles, some stenciling, some more modern finishes, some books and reference on different eras and periods and styles of wallpapers and wall murals. So if you have any questions throughout, just let me know. So I thought I'd just go ahead and start just to tell you a little bit about my background. So I came to Nantucket for my first summer with some college friends in 1993, and I waitressed over at the Easy Street Cafe. And that was my first whole summer here. And I, like everybody does, their first time on Nantucket, I fell in love. And I moved back to Ohio, where I'm from. And this particular person came with me. And he was a person that lived and made his livelihood on the water. And so as an Ohioan, I got to see a whole nother slice of life that I had no idea about. And it was fascinating to me. And so we actually bought a boat in Ohio and motored it through the Erie Canal, through the entire state of New York, and around Manhattan and Block Hill, Rhode Island, and Watch Hill, Rhode Island, and Block Island, and Martha's Vineyard, and then I came to Nantucket, and that trip took 2 weeks. And so I lived on the harbor, Nantucket Harbor, for 4 years, and I had 2 dogs and a significant other, and I would row every morning from Monomoy to town, and I started my decorative painting business, and I literally had a toolbox and a ladder, and I knocked on people's doors. And so some people were I don't have any. I don't have any photographs of my early work in here, but I can tell you my first thing that I did, which was something that I've never done since, but it was fascinating. I worked for a really nice lady on the cliff, and I would show up, and she would have little projects for me to do every day. I was like her painter, and she was very creative, and just like she you know would soar her kite high with like creativity, and so I was that person that helped facilitate these ideas, and I really enjoyed working for her. And the first thing I painted on Nantucket was on her refrigerator, and I painted a green tomato plant on the on the fridge. And so from there, things kind of expanded, and I kind of found my groove and my style, and I really realized that through the process, I loved painting historic murals, and I loved designing historic things that always have a thread to the past or a nod to the classic. And as we go through these slides, you'll see and I'll explain different eras and different styles and why I had reference to certain things. But there's a lot of historic content in here. And so some of these reference books up here is where I pull some of this from. Some of it comes from traveling. Some of it comes from, just all kinds of different searches, talking to people. And so from that, it like really creates like the story and where we start. So my business is really encompassing of interior design services for people, and within that cap, I still do my decorative painting on a daily basis. I still have my hand in the medium. I have brushes. I have studio space, and I have a showroom space, which is at 18 Broad Street, and we have different lectures ourselves there through the summer. We invite people to come and talk. And with the love and theme of design, creativity, art, and that's really where I stem from as a person. So it's nice to share that with the community. So I'll go through some slides with you. These are finished installations of homes on Nantucket, just to give you some reference. And if anybody wants to know like where some of these are located, so you could kind of feel like a similar or a connection with the area to the specific design, so you can get an idea. A lot of times I think about that, where a specific design is going to live and what the history of the home or the area was like. So we're really kind of treating the mural or the decorative finish or the design in a way that's really appropriate for the location. So this particular mural is a hand-painted mural. It's an original. I did it on canvas, and then it was installed by a wallpaper hanger. A lot of times these days, that's what I do, is I work in my studio space, stretch canvas on the wall, go and measure room space, and then I hand-paint it, typically with a team of artists. A lot of those people are Nantucket people, so we come together with a similar theme, and we work on canvases together. And this particular one has a very hand-painted, hand-brushed feeling. It's done on a canvas, and it also has a texture to it. So a lot of times back in the early American days, there was a lot of, and in the historic homes, you still see this horsehair plaster. And that type of material you really could not get super smooth. And so the walls have an undulation to them. And so sometimes when I'm working in a new construction, I like to start with the plaster finish because it still gives the integrity of the wall surface, like where it would have happened. I really like to like live in how it would have really looked back in the day of the style that I'm painting. So this is a little hallway, and we also grayed out the shingles. They were brand new, and we washed them to make them look like old shingles on a house. And so this is a modern home. This is a brand new house. And this is a big arched ceiling. And so we thought, how are we going to treat this ceiling? They had the chandelier, and I came up with a pattern that I thought would really dictate and really pay tribute to this arc with the lines and the dimensioning. And so this is a custom. We set up staging all through their house, and we hand painted on the arc. So a lot of looking up and stencil work. So this is a ceiling. This is, I was fortunate enough to do a lot of public spaces on Nantucket, and so some of you may recognize this is the Chanticleer space out in Sconset. And we did a hand stenciled floor as well as treatments on the walls. And so, a lot of times I work with the client and we come up with an idea through the vision of how they see the space, and then I bring suggestions to the table for them. This is another floor. This is very traditional to Nantucket. This is a compass rose. A lot of times people want me to paint the compass roses in the actual longitude and latitude line that their home is in. So they would be basically painting true north. And so there are many, many different ways that you can interpret a compass rose. And so this is a traditional, this is through the course of history, painted floors have been happening. Some of the original ones were spatter paint, and sometimes you'd even see those on Nantucket still. I do get called from clients to actually reproduce a spatter paint. This is more technical, but this is a real true nod to Nantucket and a very traditional, welcoming detail. Yes? Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So typically what happens is that in a construction project, I'm brought in between layers of floor finishing. So part of my job is to know the process and collaborate with the other subcontractors on the job. And typically, I'm most connected with a house painter who is applying paint to your trim, to your walls, a plasterer, and the floor person. Those are the people that I have to unite with so that they know that after one coat, that they're going to stop, they're going to screen the floor, and then I'm going to come in, I'm going to do the work, and then it gets sealed with about 3 or 4 additional coats of urethane. So some homes are already completed, and so it's something that has evolved with time for their style of their home. And so in that case, what I do is I come in and I mask off this area. And I do what the floor finisher would do by hand. So typically they're working with machines because they're doing the whole floor, but this is so specific as far as a motif, and so I'll hand sand it. And then this, I don't know if you could tell in the picture, but this is done with translucent glaze instead of solid paint. So it looks like wood inlay because you still see all the graining through. And if anybody wants to see other examples or have ideas that they want to share, there's more examples of this on my website. I kind of just consolidated to what I thought might be most interesting. But there are so many ways. You could do solid paint, you could do glaze finishes. This is a pretty intricate one. Traditionally, there were 8 arms, for the true north, south, and then all of the southwest and all the, in-betweens. But this is more intricate. So this is another example. This is a home in Sconset. And so typically in that area, you would see more of a patterned floor or a spatter paint in that area of Nantucket. And so this floor was meant to look like it has been worn over time. So it has like an aged feel to it. And again, there's so many ways that you could treat a floor. So you have to keep in mind, what the furnishings are like. Is it a modern house? What are the trim details like? And so when I come into a project, I'm looking around me to make sure that what I'm suggesting is actually going to fit the nature of the house. And so this, as you could see, like all of the wood, it has like a real like nautical rustic vibe to it. And so we did a worn floor to kind of go along with the story of the house. This is a house, and this is actually a Sconset home. This is another example of a painted floor, but this is a glaze finish, and it's another more modern. The last image, just the diamond floor, is very traditional. This is a different type of pattern, and so this was custom to the foyer. And we went in and literally marked out all the space to make sure it fits perfectly in the space. And that's a piece of the equation when I go into any home is I measure There's a lot of back-end work to the actual painting. So there's a lot of research that happens, and gathering and measuring and sampling, and then when everything's approved, that's like more than half of the actual job that I do on site. So what you're seeing is this is more of a modern look. This is a restaurant. This was a Pazzo restaurant that used to be, is now at Atlas. And this is a mural that we did in the dining room space. And again, this was painted on, I actually painted this on jute. And it was meant to look like what would typically be happening with a lot of whimsy added to it in a social restaurant scene, like a bar scene. So there are lots of characters. There's a flock of geese flying through the room. There's a donkey hanging out in the background. There's just a lot of whimsy added to this mural. This is a mural that I painted in town, and this is an example that I have here. You're welcome to come up afterwards. I have the original sketches that I did for this space because I thought it may be interesting to you to see. Again, the historic piece of the mural, which is one of my favorite things. So this is a scene of the Canton River in China. And you'll see a lot of this information here in the Whaling Museum as well. The China trade was huge. It was a big, big deal. And there's another piece of this mural, which is up here, you could see. They're basically the hongs. And what they are is they're little buildings on the other side of the river. And the countries would fly their flag, and they would have set up in there. It was almost like what today would be like an outdoor shopping mall. It was like that. And all of these vessels that were coming through would come in and exchange goods. And then a lot of those pieces, like pottery especially, and paintings, would end up on Nantucket. And so it was called the China trade. That's the whole like bracket of what that was. And so this is a depiction of what would have been typically happening. And you'll see a direct relation to the China trade book that I brought in, because I really used that book for a lot of information gathering and for visual reference for this mural. So you'll see, if you come up afterwards, you'll say, oh, okay, it's the first page in the book. But this really does tell the story. This is me painting in the studio space. And there's another picture after this. But this just shows you the scale of some of these murals. And now I think we're going to be getting into, and I'll tell you the difference between having a hand-painted original mural and then having a digitized version of the mural. Because as I've gone through this experience of 20 years working in the industry, sometimes people don't have the time frame available for an original mural. So I captured what the best options were and what I've been hearing people wanting, and I hand painted an original, and then I transferred it digitally into a computer system where I'm able to manipulate the image. It gets printed in a printer, and then it gets installed because it's wallpaper. And so that is another option. Just through the course of going through the motions myself, I found that this was a possibility, and it was so mind-blowing to me because I literally do everything by hand. So I'm not a computer person. Like I'm not techie at all. And to have this be a piece of the equation was really expanding to me as an artist. And so this kind of is the same as like a G clay. So if you get a reproduction of an original, and the price points are very different, which made it really attractive in the industry as well. So it was just another piece of the equation as far as the history of what I've learned over the course of being a painter and a designer. So this will show you what's that? Okay, so this actually, all right, so we're touching on a completely different topic, which is available studio space on Nantucket. Because I paint so large, because these canvases are going in rooms, what I have to do is literally slice the room open. And it's like if you could pull like a rolling pin over a room, and then you're just taking it and you like lay it all out flat, which you'll see here. and I, take dimensions, what the size of the entire room is, what the wall dimensions are, the height, the width, the doorways, the windows, and it all gets splayed out. And if you do that, even a little powder room is very long. And so I could not do a lot of my hired work here on Nantucket because I didn't have the wall space. A lot of the studio spaces, one of the things I was going to do, put together, but I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if this might be so boring. But I was going to show you snapshots of all the different studio spaces I have had within the 20 years from I worked in Philadelphia and had like this studio space that was like a home that was being renovated, or they were just so varied. They were so all over the place. But this is a studio space that I rented in Providence. And in Providence, the really cool thing about Providence, the one thing, there's so many things that I love about that town, but this particular area was mill factories. A lot of factory happened in Providence. And so a lot of the mill buildings are now being changed into apartments. And so this particular building was the boiler room of this factory that used to be a costume jewelry mill. And so a developer came in, made rooms, made little apartments, and this was the only one that was left blank. Nobody had touched the space. It was just a big open space. And so this wall was 40 feet long and like 22 feet high. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so I rented it for about 2 years to create a lot of the murals that ended up going into the line that I have, which you'll see through this. So this is a Providence studio space, and that's the same mural, but it shows you again just the scale. And so from the hand-painted mural, it gets photographed, and then it gets put into a computer program. And so one of the sensitivities that I have is making sure that there was nothing lost in translation between how I painted it and how it looks as a reproduction. Because if there was, I wasn't interested, because my integrity really lies in the brush. And so I was really amazed that it looked so good. And so I continued on with the process. And so this was modeled. This is the final. So this is it all stretched out from how you saw it painted to how it looks flattened out. And now this is a file in my computer. And from here, I can lay doors and windows and manipulate the image so that boats don't get cut in half or trees don't get cut in half. And then it gets printed in panels and then rolled and shipped, which I will show you that as well. But it just, in terms of style and in terms of story, this is another historic mural to the place that I love. And you can see it starts out with the Wampanoag tribe and the first settlers, and this mural is called First Settlers. And then you can see it segues through early farming town, and then it cascades into the whaling industry and the different ships, and then you see the early views of town over on the other side. And so this is painted in a French scenic style. And I'll talk to you about some different styles too. But the French scenic wallpapers, where there is a book up here, which you're welcome to flip through, most of them were block printed. And so there is still one company out there that was one of the original companies. They're called Zuber and C, and they still block print. What that means is that there is literally a wooden block that gets chiseled with a tool, and the blocks are all numbered. And then they go through the mural, and there's a grid laid out, and number 1 block will be put down and tapped down with a mallet and lifted up, and that's one color. Then they have to go back again and again and again and again to build up the dimension. And so you'll see examples in that book if you're interested. I painted this to mimic that style, but I painted it with a brush, because a lot of my style, when in my interest level, really revolved more around early American style. And so to round out the line, I did something that was a little bit different for me, and I painted in a French scenic style. And which basically means that, a lot of the French scenics are meant to be cropped. And so you could see the trees go from the from the bottom all the way to the top. So if you just wanted to vignette it, you can vignette it at different places in the mural and not have to be restricted by the canvas as a whole. So just to give you a little background. This is a topographical map of a New England town. This is also a part of the mural series that I have that's digital, and this was also hand painted. This is a chinoiserie, which is kind of a take on a Chinese trees and Chinese styles, and it has birds. It's very traditional, has birds and butterflies, and is very light and airy. And then this is another historic mural that I painted specifically to Nantucket. This is like if you're standing in the center of the island and you're standing really high and you could kind of pan around. And this one's called Nantucket Panorama because you are literally cascading around Nantucket. And so you'll see there's Monomoy Harbor and all the view of town. There's a little creative license in there with the island because that was very early American influenced. If you look at a lot of the early American painters, you'll see that they add a lot of whimsy into their style. So I put a couple islands in there. I know that they're not there. And then you move through Monomoy and the town, and then Kotu and some farming and Sankaty Lighthouse, and then it goes on to Codfish Park and the original train that we had here. And so it really gives you, like, when people say to me, well, which mural should we do? We really want it to feel like Nantucket. And so I typically guide them in this direction because it really tells the story of Nantucket, as well as the first settlers. But I find that for Nantucket, a lot of the people are more attracted to the early American style. And then I couldn't help myself, but I put the whaling scene in here. And this is another available mural within the line of digital murals, originally hand painted, but now digital. And this is yet another. So this is more of an early American feel, more serene and open. This is the Coastal Grasses mural, and this was painted with all the indigenous birds to Nantucket. And so this is such a nice one for a smaller space because you really do feel like you're sitting in the reeds. So this is how it works. This is how the digital piece of it works. So I paint an original. It gets scanned in. I take room dimensions, and you could see here, these are all the dimensions for this particular room. It was a half wall, so there's a wainscoting, and then this is the top portion of it. And you'll see throughout the entire piece where there's a door, a wall, a mirror, and so I'm able to compose it as if I was standing there and doing it by hand. And then it's paneled out, it's rolled and shipped. There's windows cut out of it already. You know, it's really easy to install. And it just basically goes up. This is it. It just goes up like wallpaper. And then this is the final. And so it's great because you really, a lot of times I still print on canvas. I paint on canvas. I'll print on canvas. Sometimes I'll print on a paper. But the great thing about this is for the client, the time that I'm in there is really just measuring. And then I'm out of their house so that they can continue to conduct business in their home without me staging, scaffolding, paint. And then it goes up in a day, and it's just like a magic poof, and all of a sudden you have a mural in your home. So for me as a painter, it really opened a lot of doors, and these are installations of the digital murals, just to kind of give you an idea. They're scalable. This is a whole wall space. The other was a half wall space. Some people use them as panels with, decorative tacks. This is the Nantucket Panorama. This is a show house in the Hamptons that I was invited to do. This is the same mural. This is the panorama, and they look so different from space to space. So even though you may be getting something that is a reproduction, it's going to look completely different in your space than it does any other space. This is the coastal grasses, and this is installed in a 10-foot wall. So you could see when you're sitting, you really feel like you're surrounded by these birds. And here's a clever person put them on their slider doors. Because it's digital and because we can pinpoint a specific location if we know where we're aiming, we can put many different things in that space. And so here you could see we put a little bird perched on a faucet. And this is the whole room. And here's another example. So this is the whaling scene. And this is it, like as if you rolling pinned out the whole, is it rolling pinned? Is that like proper? If you, flattened out the whole wall, this is what it looks like. There are lots of angles in this room. It's tiny. You could see, let's see. It was literally no wider than 2.5 feet, maybe three. And so the ceiling was angled and was tiny. It's a historic home in town, to give you some reference. So this is the little powder room before, and then this is a digital overlay to show to the client, who sometimes when people can't visualize something, the good thing about having this in a digital format is I can take their elevations, I can put it into their actual space, and you could see what it looks like even before anything's printed. And then that's the actual mural installed there. As far as some decorative painting work, I just threw this in here because I thought it was neat. But these are maps that I papered onto a wall and then put an antiquing glaze over it, like an umber glaze, so it looked rich and looks like it had been there for a long time. So now we're getting a little bit more into my pattern work and the love for pattern. And so I'll just tell you a quick story and show you some examples. So while I'm in some of these homes that are being renovated, sometimes you come across these little treasures. And so this paper, the brown paper, is from a house on Fair Street. It was in a little closet that was being demoed to widen a room. And I literally willed it off the wall and I saved it because I thought, this is amazing pattern. And it's so historic. It's historic to Nantucket. This was block printed. So basically the same thing that I was saying about the mural process. In a simplified way, this is block printed wallpaper. And a lot of the early wallpapers were block printed. And there's a book up here if you're interested in seeing that as well. So this was the inspiration, this little piece of paper, to create a whole series of patterns that accompanied the murals that rounded out the line. And so I took the pattern, tweaked it, and widened it, and added to it, and so this is the pattern. And within the line, because again, coming back from like the hand-painted custom work, I wanted to make sure that even in the pattern work that a client could change out the color and make it special for them. So all of the patterns that I have, you can do that. We use a paint chart that's not paint, but it's for print. It's called Pantone, and we can match really any color. And so these are some different examples of other patterns in the line that look hand-painted, so the integrity of the hand-painting is still there, but it is a pattern that is a wallpaper. This shows you, this just goes through like some different custom colors and how you could change the color. And so these are examples of changing the color out. And these are some examples of the wallpapers in a space. And again, some of them are really, really historic, but all of them have a hand-painted feel, even though they're a tight pattern. This is the Fair Street pattern little powder room. And people have used some of these, as focal walls. This is a custom color of the Fair Street. This is actually in the same home as my first picture, if you can remember that one, the blue plastered mural. This is, I'm going to tell you where this house is because it's actually on the house tour this year. This is 73 Main. This is that blue Victorian if you go up Main right past the bank on the right-hand side. And it's on the house tour this year if anybody has interest in going through the whole project. But I was hired to help with the design work, and also I came up with a couple specialty papers for them. And this is because it was a Victorian home, I thought a take on a damask pattern was very appropriate. And so we designed and fabricated a pattern that's now still available within the line, but was really brought about and came about because of this particular project. And there it is installed in their second floor. These are just examples, again, like installations of the patterns. Fabric, any of the patterns can go on fabric as well. And we also have aligned tables. So the patterns could go on the tables. Now this is the Coastal Grasses mural, and we wrapped it around a table. It was designed specifically for a Parsons style table. It's basically like the table's like dipped in these patterns, so the whole thing is covered. So these are just different examples. And that's it in a little room setting. I wish we could dip them like an Easter egg. You know, those like, that was the whole vision. I was like, wouldn't it be great if you could just literally, if there was like a vat of pattern and all you needed to do is just like walk over and like dip the table in and you're like, voila. But that's not actually how it goes. So because these patterns are live in the computer as well, we print them on vinyl canvas. And then the vinyl canvas is literally contact cemented to the tables and are literally tailored. They're upholstered basically with a vinyl canvas, and then they have a conversion varnish. Yeah, I say that just because maybe someday that will actually be the case. Maybe if I just put it out there to the universe, something will happen, and there will be a vat of pattern that just shows up on my door someday. It would be great. That's actually how marbleizing is done, right? So you literally have, and there's a company out there, a wallpaper company, that has their technique is literally marbleized paper. So it's like floating oil, and you lay this paper on top of it, and then you pull it up, and it like transfers the pattern right onto it. And so that's very traditional. You're a trendsetter. That was, yeah, you still are. So within the table concept, this is the one that ended up, this is the image that was from HGTV Green Home. So I had a designer that was doing the Green Home, and she got introduced to the line, and she included it in the Green Home, which was the one that was in Plymouth a little while back. And so this is the table that was there, and that's it in a room. So we're coming up on the last couple pictures, and the last couple photographs are again reeling back to the hand-painted work that I do. And this next picture is of a little boy's room, and we painted it to look like he was literally under the water in the sea. And so you could see the bottom of the boat there on the ceiling line. And the oars are dipping in the water, and there's some duck feet hanging out back there, and you know, all the like Nantucket sea life is around him, and there's a treasure chest over here. And so this was before all of the furniture was put into the room, but this kind of shows you, you know, a little bit about this was a whimsical, fun one for sure. And this is my last picture. I thought I'd end with this since we're, you know, so current and coming up with our new movie, which is in the heart of the sea with the Essex ship. And this is a mural that was painted. This is original. I painted it on site, just like the previous one. So it was meant to look tea-stained, like an old, like the 15th century Spanish map, like of the early maps. And it outlines the route of the Essex. So it tells you exactly where it went, where it stops, the time frame. It's like a captain's log. And so I thought this would be a good one to end on. And thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions, I'm here.
Thank you very much, Audrey.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, marvelous stuff. If anyone has a question, raise your hand. I'll bring the mic over. Maybe we can capture your voice.
I can't stop thinking about that Chanticleer picture.
Oh, yeah.
The floor, was that painted or was that a carpet on the floor?
Oh, no, that was painted.
You did that?
Yep, so that one was quite involved because, again, you know, the room is empty when I'm starting. And so I measure everything out. And then we start with a measurement. You can't start with, we're going in there with this exact size. Because if you do that, you are not really tailoring it to the space. One of my nemesis, which is like, I feel like I should go to therapy for this, but I'm that person that like straightens people's rugs out in their homes and their hallways because I'm like, there's 2 inches on that side and then there's 3 on this side. So I'm always like pushing it over. But even like in a space that I'm doing the pattern work, I want to make sure, like if at all possible, that we are getting the same from left to right, and hopefully it's the whole pattern. Like I don't like when things are nipped off, so sometimes I have to enlarge a pattern so it fits within those parameters or reduce it. So that one was hand painted on site, measured, and that's an old building.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like a carpet.
I saw another hand over here.
If you make an original like this,
Yep.
right, I would assume that you don't make any giclées of it because I don't know much about art other than that I love it, and I worked for an artist in the summertime when I wasn't teaching school. And if we had originals, we sold them as originals, and then we never did a reproduction of that as a giclée. So I assume you do the same thing?
Yes, so
Okay.
most of the mural images that are part of the line, I still own. So they're rolled up and they're stored. And sometime in my life, I'd like to sell the original if there was a time and place and just like was like a good thing to do. You know, I mean, I'd have to rent out the Whaling Museum to like unroll them all. But yeah, yeah.
And then let that customer or client know that that's the original, but there are giclées out there, and then they might be okay with that.
Exactly. There are different ways to slice it. You know, sometimes if some people actually like that, you know, saying that they own the original of something, you know, it kind of like makes theirs more valuable. So.
We found that too, but I'm curious.
Any another question?
Thank you.
Do you sign your work? Is there somewhere on there on every piece where you put something? or
For
your
the
name?
most part, the reproductions I typically don't sign. They end up in such a variety of places. Sometimes I don't even know where they're going. You know, a designer will order one and it's for a home, and I don't even know where that is. You know, but the originals, yes, but the reproductions, not typically.
I think you did a very small bathroom on Upper Main Street. I think it was Mark Goldwyn.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yep.
And I loved it. That was the first that I saw of your work, and it was such a small area, but it was just perfect.
Thank you. You know, when I was flipping through pictures to put in here, I actually ran across that picture. And it was hard to photograph because the doorway was so small, and you actually had to be in the space. And that's actually, I can't remember where I was, but somebody asked me about why I paint so large, like, or why I am, you know, I don't have framed pieces, small pieces of artwork. But it's funny because I don't consider myself a fine artist that way. I consider myself a decorative artist, and I would find it hard for me to paint on something that's this large, because my experience is that you see, like peripherally, you see everything around you, And so it would be hard for me to target an area because the way I like to paint is more of an environment or a feeling that you get when you're in something. I like live more in the like feeling of a surrounded space. Yeah. But I would love to try that someday, but I don't really work with small brushes. I work with bigger brushes. So it'd be a good challenge. Yes. Yep. Yep. Really? I have no idea. And this is the other piece of the equation that like I feel is a difference for me from like being a fine artist to a decorative artist because I never get attached to anything that I do. So I know that when I'm doing something, it is for a time frame. The lifespan of it is X time frame because you can take a painting down and you could take a painting with you. A lot of my murals, the reason that I sell them on canvas is because you can easily take them off and you can stretch them. So that's the advantage. Even with the reproductions, I've tried it many times myself, and you can just pull them off the wall and reframe them. But that I feel is the big difference is that I never get attached because I don't know how long it's going to last. Yeah.
A quick question for you. What got you interested, or what sparked your interest in doing such historical work, or focusing on history through your medium?
I mean, honestly, it was really, really from living on Nantucket. I mean, most of my adult life, I've been here than any other place. And I loved the exuberant sea, like the richness and the like, it is so like luscious if you take a look here. I was so intrigued by that. And I mean, Nantucket is so historical that, and there's so much to dive into there that I just started looking at other places differently too. And just now, when I go into an area, I want to know what the history of that place was because there's so much there. I mean, there's so much content no matter where you go. And the most recent, like a mural that I have kind of like on a back burner that I do want to produce sometime is I went through, because I traveled my first time to Nantucket down the Hudson River, I wanted to revisit that piece of history for me. And I found so many historic like homesteads, estates, stories of the land. And so I did a lot of research and took pictures and took boat cruises from like Albany to this point and then got back in my car and drove back down and then got on another boat cruise from here to here. So I kind of like relived that whole piece. And eventually I'm going to do a storyline of the Hudson River and coming around the river because I think it's so, I love it. And so I don't know. I feel, I don't know if I'm answering your question properly, but it really was coming from living here. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
That actually is a perfect segue to what I was going to ask. I wanted to know if there's any space on Nantucket or a client that you haven't worked for or a location that you haven't worked in that you could see your murals or a vision that you have that you'd love to try.
On Nantucket?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really do like a storyline. I feel like there's a whole like farming piece of Nantucket that like agriculturally hasn't been like for me like kind of like honed in on. And the landscape is so fun to paint. I wouldn't mind doing something like that, like specifically like the sheep and just all the farmland, like the first pieces of it, because you see a lot of it now, and it's a lot of like historic structures or historic buildings, because that is a big piece of it, right? The building and what people did. But if you bring it back to like more like simplicity, you know, just like painting that environment, I think I would enjoy that.
Always a pleasure to hear you, Audrey.
Thank you.
What would you have any advice for someone who owns a historic house that's unclimatized and wants to put patterns on their wall?
To put pattern.
To put pattern, mural,
Mm-hmm.
paper, whatever. What would be your advice?
Well, the good news about doing a hand-painted original is it's much better than doing a wallpaper, because with the fluctuality, the moisture content, high and low, it has an effect on the wall surface, and so you know you'll. I think that some installers might know the answer to this much better than me, but working with a breathable material is important, and being able to overlay on walls with a breathable material. That's why a lot of times I use water-based and I use on a canvas. But really the best thing for something like that, especially in a historic home, is to actually paint directly on the wall.
Wonderful. You here?
Well, as a paper hang, I can sort of address that moisture issue a bit. I know if you do something like a vinyl wall covering, I've removed a lot of them. There's mold behind them because they don't breathe, and so moisture gets trapped there, and you know, it basically all you need is heat and moisture to have mold and mildew, and so a lot of things, and even some coated wallpapers and stuff, when you go to take them down, you'll find mold behind them. So that breathability portion is very important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's so helpful.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much, Audrey.
Thank
this has
you
been
so
great.
much for
and
coming.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks.
We'll see you in the spring.